So SB 906 would require parents to answer questions about their firearm ownership, storage, and accessibility to schools. Esther Valdez Clayton is next to talk about it.
But first, a lot of companies are frustrated with their websites. It looks old, it's hard to update, and it's not generating any leads. Well, Sage Tree gets it. Since 2005, Sage Tree has been helping companies with websites that look great, work great, and get leads. Stop being embarrassed by your website and get one that you're proud to share. Contact Sage Tree today to get a website that makes the phone ring. Getting started is easy. Just go to sagetree.com, schedule a call, go to sagetree.com, and press the schedule a call button. All right, well, we're still waiting for Esther.
She not called in yet?
Not yet. So let's talk a little bit more about that conference because you didn't really get into it really deep. What was your general consensus of the attitudes of all of these folks coming to
Well, you know, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting that Joe and I were talking about on the way back is the room. You know, you had, so there's 58 counties. I don't think we had all 58 counties there, right, Joe? Probably had like 40 or so.
Yeah, I think they had about that many last year, and it seemed pretty similar this year.
So 40 counties. The interesting thing is, you know, you only get one representative from each county, or two, right? But it's equal, right? You don't get, you know, just because L.A. is a big county, they didn't have 20 people there.
San Bernardino didn't have 200.
Yeah, everybody either has one or two. The interesting thing is that crowd was, I felt, very I felt there were a far more pro-CCW, pro-gun. You know, they had a couple of prizes that they gave to people, and you know, at least one was a firearm. And I felt that they were a lot more open.
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you walked into that room, you wouldn't think, "Wow, this is a wacky." If someone from Oklahoma walked into that room, they probably wouldn't think, "Wow, this is a wacky California crowd." You know?
Okay, so let's go back to last year when you went.
Yep.
What was the general attitude then better or worse today?
Yeah, I thought it was the same, but
Okay.
I guess my point is that, you know, California has this. I mean, it's really just a few concentrated areas in California of, you know, where there's kind of, maybe just specifically about guns, there's kind of an anti-gun sentiment.
But aren't those guys' hands tied? You know, if they're pro CCW and they really want to make it happen, I mean, the people around them, is there any interference from city council and the mayor and?
Well, you know, the sheriff, basically. You know, it's how good you are in CCWs
is one man.
It's pretty much up to the sheriff.
Yeah, like 90% up to the sheriff. Yeah. So whether or not you issue, I don't know. Am I describing it well, Joe? How did you feel?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Most of the people there seemed to be real supportive and enthusiastic. You know, a couple of things I do notice. I don't know how many of them actually carry. I mean, we talked to some of the some of the offices or some of the agencies where, you know, they thought, well, maybe one or two people in the office actually carried. And the only, you know, the down thing or the downside to that is that, you know, unless you do it, you really don't, I don't know that you really understand it well. You know, there was kind of an attitude of, okay, well, we're going to grant these things to people. And they were supportive and everything, but it's just, I don't know. To me, that's a little bit, I don't know. I wasn't crazy about that, but in general, though, they were pretty supportive in doing what they did.
I mean, I guess it struck me as very interesting, and one of the discussions Joe and I had on the drive back is that's kind of the point of the Senate. You know, that's why we have a Senate. That's why we have a House of Representatives. That's you know, the people are voted or decided, their districts are decided by population, and then that's why we have a Senate where you get equal representation from each state. It kind of showed the value of that, I guess, you know, because you saw this overall room full of people, and they're all Californians, and some were from big counties, some were from small counties. But the majority of that room was not, they weren't anti-gun zealots, they weren't weird, they weren't strange, they were, you know, just like they probably poll very similar to the rest of the nation. But I thought it's really, really good that Solano County is doing what they're doing. They really are just trying to streamline this thing to make sure that more and more counties can get CCWs. And I think that's important. And anyway, okay, so we have Esther on the line. Esther Valdez Clayton is on the school board out in Coronado, and she brought it to my attention last week about SB 906, that talks about requiring parents to disclose firearms ownership. So we wanted to have her on the show to talk more about it. Esther, how are you?
I'm doing really well, and again, thank you for having me on.
Well, thanks for bringing this to my attention, and thanks for coming on. First off, did I get that right? You're on the school board for what is it, Coronado?
Yes, Coronado Unified School District. I'm currently the school board president, and as a school board, as most of your school boards should have to do, you have to keep up to date with what Sacramento is doing. And one of the alarming things that, thank you for wanting to even shed light on this, is State Bill 906, which is titled School Safety with Firearm Disclosure. And it's exactly what you said. Schools have to immediately report that parents or guardians have to disclose where there's firearms, if they have firearms at the home, and I quote, the details on the ownership, storage, and accessibility of these firearms. And again, not only has this nothing to do with academics, this has everything to do with government controlling now that students have to basically rat out their parents. But the very sinister part of this is that the other legislation that's being introduced alongside with this gun situation is having to do with vaccines. It's mandated that all children will have to have vaccines. That's SB 866. But not just that, but with no personal belief or religious belief exemption. That's State Bill 871. What does this have to do with guns? They want to know which parents are, quote, likely to be a credible threat if they own a gun.
Quote. Now, you just said quote. Who are you quoting? They actually says that in the bill, or?
I'm reading it right here.
Holy
Schools
cow.
to immediately report upon becoming aware of a credible violent threat to law enforcement are required to disclose.
So let me just I think what you're saying is that they're trying to determine who is vaccinated, or they want to require people to be vaccinated. And if they're not vaccinated, they want to know if they have a gun or not because they'll consider them a threat.
Yes. And again, these are standalone bills. But what is very interesting and kind of sinister to me is that they're being presented all together. And I don't think that is a legislative coincidence. I think they want, because they know there's an overlap with concerned parents. And as a parent and as a gun owner and as a former single mom, I did own a gun when I felt threatened, when I was getting stalked and harassed by a stalker. And why would the school now want my daughter to disclose where I have the gun, the details on my gun ownership, but for the fact that the state is now interested in knowing which parents own them in case there's some kind of outburst because of the vaccine mandate. That's the only connection to the schools that I can think of.
What are the consequences? What if the form that they want me to fill out about my guns, what if I take that and throw it away and totally trash it? What are the consequences for not complying?
There are no consequences, and I have the Senate bill right in front of me. All it is a burden on the parent and on the schools and on the children. There's no burden to have to protect that confidential information. There's no extra standalone legislative information seeking to maintain this confidentially. What happens if this is in the wrong hands? Who gets to limit this information? Who is this disseminated to? The schools. Why the schools? Probably and possibly, and again, I'm just speculating at this point, because of the other joint legislation having to do with the vaccine mandate and the lack of personal exemption. It's the same group of people in their eyes. The Second Amendment people, the people who want parental rights, who want their constitutional rights, they happen to also be gun owners like myself. And unapologetically, we do it because of our child's safety, but to now be deemed as a, quote, credible violent threat in case the school determines there's a threat of violence from a parent, this is already something that I hope every one of your listeners, and again, thank you for drawing attention to this, has to oppose State Bill 906 and the other bills, but for the time being, at least the gun bill.
So, Esther, you're saying the SB 906 in the bill doesn't have any specific penalties for non-compliance, basically? Is that something that's left open or left up to the schools, or the school district can decide if a parent just doesn't comply, like Michael was saying, if they just refuse to provide that information? Can the school district do something if there's nothing in the bill that provides for a penalty?
I'm sure there is, but the whole legislative intent of all of this it was to have that firearm disclosure and that disclosure to take place in the schools. Later on, if they want to limit and establish guidelines, they can do so, and I'm sure coupled with sheriff's departments and law enforcement agencies, they'll be able to do that. But that's not the intent of this bill. This bill was presented in a school board forum. It was presented for schools to be able to enforce. This isn't for law enforcement. Remember, this is something that's going to take place in schools. If they want to do all those other limitations, they can. But what's the point?
But we got to stop it now. Yeah, and that's
on the Second Amendment.
And Esther, that's my fear. My fear is that people will hear this and they'll go, "Well, if there's no consequences, I don't care." You have to care. You have to care about this. Just because there's no consequences now doesn't mean there won't be in the future. It's horrible. If you want to meet Esther, if you want to hear more about this, she's actually going to be at our meeting on Wednesday night. Ed LaBella, 6 o'clock. Go to our website, SanDiegoCountyGunOwners.com, for information, and she's going to talk more about this. Esther, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for bringing this to light. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.